Hello and welcome to the Metropolitan Community Church of Toronto's weekly worship service. Today is Jingles, Jammies, and Jeans, or is it Jammies, Jeans, and Jingles? Either way, it's going to be a little bit more of an informal service with a moving Christmas story and some of the best music from MCC Toronto's incredible music ministry. So enjoy today's service. As always, you can make a congregational care request, prayer request, or benevolence fund request online at www.mcctoronto.com/care. You can find out information about all of our holiday check-ins on Sunday nights, Tuesday nights, and Thursday nights at 7 p.m. this week. As well as after today's service, we have our digital coffee hour check-in at about 11:45 on Zoom. On Wednesdays, we have a midweek worship service on Facebook Live as well. You can find out about that and more in our electronic newsletter, The Query, which you can sign up at the bottom of our website at any point in time. Take a deep breath. And let's prepare our hearts, our minds, and our spirits for worship.
Oh, come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant. Oh, come ye, to Bethlehem. Behold him, born the King of angels. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord. Sing, choirs of angels, sing in exultation. Oh, sing, all ye citizens of heaven above. Glory to God in the highest. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord. I'll sing. See how the shepherds summon to his cradle, leaving their flocks drawn nigh to gaze. We too will tie the bend of joyful footsteps. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come.
Christmas Miracle of Jonathan Toomey by Susan Wojciechowski. The village children called him Mr. Gloomy, but in fact his name was Toomey, Jonathan Toomey. And though it's not kind to call people names, this one fitted him well, for Jonathan seldom smiled and never laughed. He went mumbling and grumbling, muttering and sputtering around, complaining that the church bells were too often, the birds sang too shrilly, and the children played too loudly. There's a picture of grumpy old Mr. Toomey. You see, Mr. Toomey was a woodcarver. Some said he was the best woodcarver in the whole valley. He spent his days sitting at his workbench, carving beautiful shapes from blocks of pine and hickory and chestnut wood. After supper, he sat in a straight-backed chair near the fireplace, smoking his pipe, staring into the flames. Jonathan Toomey wasn't an old man, but if you saw him, you might think he was, the way he walked bent forwards with his head down. You would notice his eyes, the clear blue of the August sky in them. And you wouldn't see the dimple on his chin, since his face was mostly hidden under a shaggy, untrimmed beard speckled with sawdust and wood shavings. And depending on what he'd eaten that day, crumbs of bread or a bit of potato or dried gravy. The village people didn't know it, but there was a reason for his gloom, a reason for his grumbling, a reason why he walked hunched over as if he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. Some years earlier, Jonathan Toomey was young and full of life and love with a child and a baby, but they became very ill. And because in those days there weren't hospitals or medicines or skilled doctors, his wife and baby died 3 days apart from each other. So Jonathan packed up his belongings into a wagon and traveled until his tears stopped and settled into a tiny house at the edge of a village to do his wood carving. One day in early December, there was a knock on Jonathan's door. Mumbling and grumbling, he went to answer it, and there stood a woman and a young boy. "I'm the widow McDowell," said, "and I'm new to your village. This is my son Thomas," the woman said. "I'm 7 and I know how to whistle," said Thomas. "Whistling is pish-posh," said the woodcarver gruffly. "Well, I need something carved," said the woman, as she told Jonathan about a very special set of Christmas figures her grandfather had carved when she was a little girl. "When we moved here, I discovered they were lost," she explained, "and I had hoped by some miracle I would find them again, but it hasn't happened." "Well, there's no such thing as miracles," the woodcarver told her. "Now can you describe the figures to me?" "There was a sheep," she told him. "2 of them with curly wool," added Thomas. "Yes, 2, said the widow. "And a cow, and an angel, and Mary and Joseph, and the baby Jesus, and the wise men. 3 of them," added Thomas. "Will you take the job?" asked the widow McDowell. "I will," he answered. "I'm grateful. How soon can you have them ready?" "Well, they will be ready when they're ready," he said. "But I must have them by Christmas," Mrs. McDowell said. "They mean very much to me, and I can't remember a Christmas without them." "Christmas is pish-posh," said Jonathan gruffly, and he shut the door. Here's Mrs. McDowell and Thomas and Jonathan.
Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Shall come to thee, O Israel. Do 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 da da do da 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 ba 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 bom da bom ba da de da da be ba ba be ba be ba ba dum ba ba boom ba ba da ba boom ba da dum. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Shall come to thee, O Israel.
The following week, there was a knock at the woodcarver's door. Muttering and sputtering, he went to answer it. And there stood Widow McDowell and Thomas. "Excuse me," said the widow, "but Thomas has been begging to come and watch you work. He says he wants to be a woodcarver when he grows up and would like to watch you since you are the best in the valley." "I'll be quiet. You won't even know I'm here. Please, please," piped in Thomas. With a grumble, the woodcarver stepped aside to let them in. He pointed to a stool near his workbench. "No talking, no jiggling, and no noise," he ordered Thomas. The widow McDowell handed Mr. Toomey a warm loaf of cornbread as a token of thanks. Then she took out her knitting and sat down in a rocking chair in the far corner of the cottage. "Not there!" bellowed the woodcarver. "No one sits in that chair." So she moved to a straight-backed chair by the fire. Thomas sat very still. Once he had a sneeze, and he pressed his finger under his nose to hold it back. And once he wanted to desperately scratch his leg, but he counted to 20 to keep his mind off of the itch. After a very long time, Thomas cleared his throat and whispered, "Mr. Toomey, may I ask you a question?" The woodcarver glared at Thomas, then shrugged his shoulders and grunted. Thomas decided that meant yes, so he went on. "Is that my sheep you're carving?" Well, the woodcarver nodded and grunted again. After another very long time, Thomas whispered. Mr. Toomey, excuse me, but you're carving my sheep wrong. Oh, the widow McDowell's knitting needle stopped clicking. Jonathan Toomey's knife stopped carving. But Thomas went on. It's a beautiful sheep, nice and curly, but my sheep looked happy. That's pish-posh, said Mr. Toomey. Sheep are sheep. They cannot look happy. And my cow looked joyful, said Thomas. Baloney, said Jonathan Toomey. Cows can't look joyful. Well, mine did, answered Thomas. They knew they were with the baby Jesus, so they were happy and joyful. After that, Thomas was quiet for the rest of the afternoon, but when the church bells chimed 6 o'clock, Mr. Toomey grumbled under his breath about the awful noise. The widow McDowell said it was time to leave, so Thomas sneezed 3 times and thanked the woodcarver for allowing him to watch. That evening, after a supper of cornbread and boiled potatoes, the woodcarver sat down on his bench, he picked up his knife, and he picked up the sheep, and he worked until his eyelids drooped shut.
The lamp is burning low upon my tabletop. The snow is softly falling. The air is still in the silence of my room. I hear your voice softly calling. If I could only have you near to breathe a sigh or two, I would be happy just to hold the hands I love on this winter night with you. Smoke is rising in the shadows overhead. My glass, it's almost empty. I read again between the lines upon each page the words of love you sent me. If I could know within my heart that you were lonely too, I would be happy just to hold the hands I love on this winter night with you. Fire is dying now, my lamp is growing dim. The shades of night are lifting. The morning light steals across my window pane, where webs of snow are drifting. If I could only have you near to breathe a sigh or two, I would be happy just to hold the hands I love on this winter night with you. and to be once again with you.
A few days later, there was a knock at the woodcarver's door. He smoothed down his hair as he went to answer it. At the door, there was the widow and her son. "May we watch again?" asked Thomas. As Mrs. McDowell warmed the tea and put a plate of fresh molasses biscuits on the workbench, Thomas watched the woodcarver work on the figure of an angel. After a very long time, Thomas spoke. "Mr. Toomey, excuse me, is that the angel you're carving?" "Yes," answered Jonathan Toomey. "And would you do me a favor and tell me what exactly I'm doing wrong?" "Well, my angel looked like one of God's most important angels because he was sent to the baby Jesus." "And just how does one make an angel look important?" asked the woodcarver. "Well, you'll be able to do it," said Thomas. "You're the best woodcarver in the valley." And there's Thomas and Jonathan Toomey and Mrs. McDowell by the fire. Well, after a very long time, Thomas spoke. "Mr. Toomey, excuse me, can I ask a question?" "Do you ever stop talking?" asked the woodcarver. "My mother says I don't," answered Thomas. "She says I could learn the virtue of silence from you." Under his breath, the woodcarver's face turned pink, and Mrs. McDowell's face turned as red as the scarf she was knitting. "Well, speak up. What's your question?" "Will you please teach me to carve?" asked Thomas. "I'm a very busy man," grumbled the woodcarver. But he put down the important angel and said, "You will carve a bird." "A robin, I hope," said Thomas. "I like robins." And with a piece of charcoal, the woodcarver sketched out a robin on a brown piece of paper. He handed it to Thomas with a small block of pine and a little knife. And he showed him how to loop the corners from the back, slowly smooth the edges of the wood into curves. Thomas copied the woodcarver's strokes, head bent, tongue working from side to side of his lower lip as he concentrated. And when the church bells chimed 6 o'clock, Jonathan Toomey was holding Thomas's hand in his, guiding the knife along the edge of a wing. He didn't even hear the bells ringing. But the widow McDowell said it was time to leave. Thomas brushed the wood shavings from his shirt. Then he reached out and brushed 2 especially large pieces of wood shaving from Jonathan Toomey's beard. He thanked the woodcarver for teaching him how to carve. Later, after supper of boiled potatoes and molasses biscuits, Jonathan Toomey went back to his workbench. He thought for a long time, and he sketched drawing after drawing until finally he picked up his carving knife, and he picked up the angel, and he carved until his eyelids drooped shut. And there's Thomas learning how to carve. A few days later, there was a knock on the woodcarver's door, and Mr. Toomey jumped to answer it. Well, there stood the widow McDowell with a bouquet of pine branches and holly sprigs dotted with berries, and there stood Thomas clutching his partly carved robin. While Thomas and Mr. Toomey carved, Mrs. McDowell put the branches in a jar of water. She scrubbed Mr. Toomey's kitchen table and set the jar in the center. On a pretty cloth embroidered with lilies of the valley and daisies she found in a drawer below the cupboard. "Next, I will carve the wise men and Joseph," said the woodcarver. "Perhaps before I begin, you will tell me all the mistakes I'm going to make?" "Well," said Thomas, "my wise men were wearing the most wonderful robes because they were going to see Jesus. And my Joseph was leaning over the baby Jesus like he was protecting him. He looked very serious." It wasn't until the church bells chimed and the widow and her son were preparing to go that Mr. Toomey even saw the jar of pine branches and the scrubbed table and the cloth embroidered with lilies of the valley and daisies. "I found the cloth in the drawer. I thought it would look so pretty on this table," the widow McDowell said, smiling. "Never open that drawer," the woodcarver said harshly. When the two had left, Jonathan put that cloth away. That evening, after a boiled supper of potatoes, the woodcarver took out Joseph and the wise men and carved until his eyes drooped shut. A few days later, there was another knock on the woodcarver's door. He dusted the crumbs from his beard, brushed the sawdust of his shirt, and he went to the door where the widow McDowell and Thomas were. All afternoon, Thomas watched the woodcarver's work. And when it was time to leave, Jonathan said to Thomas, "I'm about to begin the last two figures, Mary and the baby. Can you tell me how they looked?" "Well, they were the most special of all," said Thomas. "Jesus was smiling and reaching up to his mother. And Mary looked like she loved him very much." "Thank you, Thomas," said the woodcarver. "Well, tomorrow is Christmas," the widow McDowell said. "Is there any chance the figures will be ready?" "They will be ready when they're ready." "I understand," said the widow, and she handed Jonathan 2 parcels. "Merry Christmas," she said. Jonathan folded his arms across his chest. "I want no presents," he said harshly. "Well, that is exactly why I'm giving them to you," answered the widow, and she put them down on the table and left. Jonathan sat down at the table. Slowly he opened the first parcel. Inside was a red scarf, hand-knitted warm and bright, and he tied that scarf around his neck. The other parcel held a robin, crudely carved in pine. A smile twitched at the corners of Jonathan's mouth as he ran his finger over the lopsided wings. He dusted the mantelpiece with his sleeve, and he placed the robin exactly in the center, so he could look at it from his chair. The woodcarver did not eat supper that day. Instead, he began to sketch the final figures, Mary and Joseph. He drew Mary and crumpled up the sketch into a ball and tossed it on the floor. He drew the baby, but he crumpled the sketch and tossed it in a ball on the floor too. He sketched again and again and once more crumpled the paper. Soon, there was a small mountain of crumpled papers at his feet. But he picked up a block of wood. He tried to carve, but his knife would not do what he wanted it to. He hurled the chunk of wood in the fireplace and sat by the flames. Then he heard the church bells announcing the midnight Christmas service, and he got up and he slowly opened the drawer beneath the cupboard. The drawer he had told the widow never to open. From it he took the cloth embroidered with lilies of the valley and daisies. He took out a rough wooden shawl and a lace handkerchief. He took out a tiny white baby blanket and a little pair of blue slocks, and he placed each piece gently on the floor. And from the bottom of the drawer, he lifted out a picture framed beautifully, carved in deep brown chestnut wood. There's the picture. In the frame was a charcoal sketch of a woman sitting in a rocking chair, holding a baby, and the baby's arms were reaching up and touching the woman's face. The woman was looking down at the baby, smiling. And Jonathan sat down in his rocking chair, held the picture against his chest, and he rocked slowly, his eyes closed, as 2 tears trailed down his beard. When he finally took the picture to his workbench, he began to carve. His fingers worked quickly and surely, and he carved all throughout the night.
For the last few weeks, we've been showing videos of some of your fellow congregants talking about how they're keeping their faith in these interesting times. Here's one more that I think you'll appreciate.
Happy holidays, everyone. I'm Richard.
And I'm Henry. 23 years ago, after Richard and I first met, we started attending Metropolitan Community Church, a place where we felt valued, grew spiritually, and developed many new friendships.
As a church family over the years, we've faced many challenges, and we've always risen to the occasion. This year's been a challenge like no one has ever known, but once again, we're rising to the occasion.
Our pastors, our board of directors, our staff, all of us have embraced a new way of worshiping, connecting with each other, and supporting each other, and it's working.
During the pandemic, I've had a few occasions to be over either outside or inside the empty church building, and even that has been nice. But it's made me realize more than ever that it's not the place that makes us the church. It's all of us together, either physically or virtually, that makes us the church family that we are.
So when we watch the church every Sunday online, when we watch that amazing Christmas concert online, when we support the church, we feel like family.
And on Christmas Eve, when we're together watching the Christmas Eve service, we'll feel like family once again. In fact, we feel so much like family that MCC is where we had our wedding.
It seems like yesterday.
Henry, it was yesterday. And one of our family members, Reverend Dina, performed the ceremony.
Yes, I remember it well.
And that's how we've been keeping the faith. Merry Christmas
Happy New Year.
to all of our family.
Seriously, was that not sweet? It is a sweet thing that finally, after over 22 years together, Henry and Richard have finally tied the knot. It was my joy and my privilege to unite them in marriage right here at MCC Toronto. It's also a joy to know that for pretty much most of that time together, MCC Toronto has been a part of both of their lives. They're both active and beloved members of our congregation. They're beloved to many people. Many people are taking a great deal of happiness from the fact that they have finally tied the knot. Some folks have even offered gifts to MCC Toronto in honor of their wedding. If there's someone that gives you joy and you would like to make a gift in their honor or in their memory, this would be a great time of year to do that as part of your year-end giving. We can offer tax receipts for any gifts that are made up to and including December 31st. So this is the last week to be part of the Keeping the Faith campaign. We'd love for you to be a part of it. Most of all, we wish you a very happy Christmas and a blessed and healthy new year.
The next day, Christmas morning, there was a knock on the widow McDowell's door. And when she opened it, there stood the woodcarver, his neck wrapped in a red scarf, holding a wooden box stuffed with straw. "Mr. Toomey," said the window, "what a surprise! Merry Christmas!" "The figures are ready," he said as he stepped inside. And from the box, Jonathan unpacked 2 curly sheep, happy sheep because they were with Jesus. He unpacked a proud, joyful cow and an angel, an important angel with mighty wings stretching up to its shoulders, right down to the hem of its gown. And he unpacked 3 wise men wearing the most wonderful robes, edged with fur and falling in rich folds. And he unpacked a serious and caring Joseph, and finally he unpacked Mary, wearing a rough woolen shawl, looking down, loving her precious baby son. And Jesus was smiling, reaching up to touch his mother's face. That day, Jonathan went to the church service with the widow McDowell and Thomas. And that day in the churchyard, the village children saw Jonathan throw back his head, showing his clear blue as the August sky eyes, and laugh. And no one called him Mr. Gloomy ever again. The end. And so a very Merry Christmas to you and to yours, and a Happy New Year. Right, Chess?
And so, during this time of Advent, as we always do, we come to this table, and it is not my table, it's not Jeff's table, it's not this church's table, it's God's table, and it's your table. And you are invited, no matter who you are or where you come from. I suggest you grab a cup of coffee and a cookie, a cracker and some juice, whatever says communion to you, because we can do this together. God is with you.
And also with you.
Lift up your hearts.
We lift them up to God.
Let us give thanks to God.
It is right to give thanks and pray.
It is a right and good and joyful thing, always and everywhere, to give thanks to you, a living and loving God, creator of heaven and earth. And therefore we praise you, joining our voices with the whole company of heaven and people of all times and places, who forever sing to proclaim the glory of your name. You were betrayed, you took the bread. After giving thanks, you broke it and said, "This is my body, broken for you. And as you do this, remember me." This is my body, broken for you. And as you do this, remember me.
On the night you were betrayed, you held the cup. After giving thanks, you lifted it up. This is my life, poured out for you. And as you do this, remember me. This is my life, poured out for you. And as you do this, remember me.
So we thank you
For the cup
and for the bread.
for we see the love you gave and the life And let us now proclaim the mystery of our faith, that Christ has died, and Christ is risen, and Christ will come again.
These are the gifts of God, and you are the people of God. Feel free now to consume whatever says communion to you. As you go from the place where you are to the places where you will be, or even just the place where you will stay, go knowing that God is with you everywhere. Amen and amen. Go and be blessed.
Now, out of the night, soft as the dawn, into the light. Innocent child, soft as the dawn, this child is born. One small heart, one pair of eyes, one work of art. Here in my arms, here he lies.
trusting and warm. Blessed this morn, this child is born. Out of the night, soft as the dawn, into the light, this child, innocent child, soft as a fawn, this child is born. One small heart, one pair of eyes, one word of here in my arms, here he lies, trusting and warm.